Hello, welcome along. Thought we'd have another discussion, even though Rod's not with us. We'll see whether we do next week or not. I don't know, but just something I read recently that I thought was interesting, so I thought I would share. So read a book by Mark Sayers. Mark Sayers, Australian, Melbourne. I first heard from him. He was doing stuff on Generation Y and who they were back in the early noughties, so 15 years ago or something like that. And yeah, he's written a number of books reflecting on where the church is at and stuff like this. And so the book I was reading was called Disappearing Church, and I would have it, but I was halfway along till he wrote and went, I forgot to get it off my desk and I couldn't be bothered turning back. So you're just going to have to believe me. So Disappearing Church, and reflecting on that movement of church and talking about post-Christendom, which is the thing that, and what that means for us now. And so probably, hopefully you've heard the fact that, we used to think of Christendom, and Christendom sort of spans from Constantine through to sometime in the last century, towards the end of last century, probably. So Constantine, 320, around 322 or 3, Battle of Milvian Bridge, wins part of or is one of the 4 sort of people in charge of the Roman Empire, wins a battle at Milvian Bridge, saying he's had a vision from God and putting the cross on or some sort of Christian symbol on his thing, then eventually becomes whole emperor, and he makes Christianity not an illegal thing. So prior to that, the emperor had banned Christianity. He now says it's all right. Some people say he made it the state religion. He doesn't. That's not till Theodosius, numerous emperors later, but he makes it acceptable, which brings in this sense of it's now state accepted, and we get this idea that then goes through where in the West, Christianity becomes the center of culture to a fair amount, and everything revolves around that. And of course, we've seen the decline of that in the late part of last century, to where we go. Christendom has ended and we're now post-Christian. Mark says that the way we think of that, about that, was affected by a number of key people coming back from mission fields, one of whom was Leslie Newbigin. I was trying to see if his book was over there so I could remember his name because it wasn't coming, but it just come. So he spent time, I think, was in India, and then returns to England and sort of goes, we need mission here. And there's a few others that return to different places. And so this sense grew in our minds that we're now post-Christian. We need the mission back like Christianity, sort of spread out through mission. We go to these people that know nothing about God, and we teach them about God and about Jesus. And so to a certain degree, at least as I was reading the book, I went, yes, this was me. We have this view of we're in this post-Christian world, so we need to teach them about Christianity. Would that be fair, Kylie? So,
yeah.
So we have this view. Mark says we actually haven't gone backwards. So we haven't gone back to where people had no knowledge. We actually moved to a new third phase. And if you think about it, that's true. They may not have the knowledge about some of the key things about Christianity, but some of the key things we hold have now just become part of society. So if you think back to the early church, the idea that, slaves were equal and people were free and there was justice, that was new. Christianity has something new. If we share that message now, it's like, well, of course, that's part of society. And so in the sense, while we might have lost some of the knowledge about Christianity, some of the core things have still impacted society. So we haven't gone back to, we're in this land where they know nothing about God and we need to teach them. We're actually in this new land. And Kylie's nodding, and this is what I was doing in the book going, that's so true, isn't it?
Yeah. And they've also got their other gods, like you've got your other religions that have got knowledge through theirs, sort of ish.
Yes. Yep. Yes, so we're more knowledgeable about the other religions in the world, sort of stuff, is what you're saying, that now we've got.
Yeah, and also like linking, going, I don't know nothing about God, but I've heard about the Hindus' God. I've heard about the everyone's gods and kind of
things. Yeah. So that sense of we've moved to something new, which for me was like, well, that's really good, because I think it's important for us sometimes. We're answering questions that we think are the right answer that aren't. That's part of why I did a session at Amplify on some of the stuff that Andrew Root's been writing based on the Charles Taylor stuff. Because for me, that's talking about, we're actually not answering the questions that the society around us, we're answering the questions that the church thinks we need to, whereas maybe. So we've for an example, the Andy Root stuff.
Sorry.
So I like, and I've never found anywhere that he's put it into a book. But when I sat in on a class he was doing down in Sydney in 2017, January, just when Trump was put into power. And he had these two circles. And in the first circle was sort of the old way of looking at the world and society, and looking at this with 5. Oh, Lord. I'll try and draw it. So 5 elements to society. The most important used to be the family. Probably got those wrong, sizes wrong, but anyway, you can read them. The second most important was church. So family and church were key parts of society. Then you had sort of social status, and the things you have, the social status you have. Actually, I think that's economy, but it's about social status.
There's one to do with like education or a job or something.
It's more about, I can't remember the X words, but it's like what you've got, your status in life, and government. So they were all fairly small. These were church and family. That's the world that the church often still speaks into. We go, hey, church and family are important. Let's speak into that world. Whereas if you think about the world now, what's important is sort of the wealth economy type stuff. What I've got, that's the most important. How do I get a good life? How do I make sure my kids have a life where they have the things they want? After that comes status. How do I get them? So, we have these families that go, hey, no, my kids are going to go and play sport instead of, because they might become this great soccer player. So why would I send them to church if they could become? And so in this world, that's totally logical. Then you've got government, families much smaller, and the church is minuscule. It's not that they're not interested in the church, it's just it's not important to them. So as I work out, how do I get a good life? Well, I'm thinking about status and wealth. I'm not thinking about the church. So that sense of where church is answering questions that the world's not thinking about, and the world's thinking about something else. We need to, it's not changed necessarily the content of the message. So we're not saying the gospel's wrong, but we're saying we need to present that in a different way. So an example for that is now when I advertise Jaffa, I always put in that the grade sexes go through a leadership program. So it's like, hey, this isn't just about learning about God, because that's not important to you, but you want your kids to, grow in status. They're going to learn to be leaders. This is really good. Come and join this program. So yes, that's an example of that. Right. And so, So for the post-Christendom stuff, we're busy trying to go, how do I educate you about who God is? Because you apparently know nothing. Maybe we need to attack from a different place and a different world. And he suggests that maybe the world we live in actually looks like a modern form of Gnosticism. So Gnosticism was a heresy in the early church, and you see elements of it right through church history. So Gnosticism was this sense of there is good and there is evil in the world. So for the Gnostics, creator God couldn't be the God that we followed because he's made this world that's a mess. He can't be the real ultimate God because, there's sin, there's mosquitoes and things. They don't say mosquitoes, but there's things like that, this is a bad world. The creator God must be somewhat bad. There's someone greater. And there's this sense of dark and light, evil and good. And you see elements of that scattered through church history. But also they felt that how you get to be with the ultimate God and in some ways become a God in some elements of Gnosticism is you get certain knowledge. That Jesus gave certain knowledge, and and so if you read, there are a bunch of Gnostic Gospels. So if you hear about things like the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Judas, things like that, lots of them were found in a rubbish heap in Egypt. I'm trying to think if it's Nag Hammadi or Oxyrhynchus or if they're both the same. But anyway, they found this bunch of Gnostic Gospels, which have slowly been translated. And yes, they're very much into teaching. So the Gospel of Thomas is very much sayings of Jesus. There's not really many stories in it, and other things like that. And we don't include, people go, why aren't they in the Bible? So we've cut them out because most of them are very, very late. Like you can work out they're not within that first century. They're in the second century, possibly some even later than that. So they're not reliable. I think there's a narrative, or is it the narrative Gospel of Peter, or maybe it's just the Gospel of Peter. And it has, after the resurrection and the stone walks away and Jesus comes out of the tomb and a big cross comes out after him. So if you think our Gospels are full of weird things, read the Gnostic Gospels. They're just wacky. This is why we don't include them in the Bible, or one of the reasons, because they're just nutbags. So yeah, there was this great knowledge. So what Mark Sayers is suggesting is that we're actually in this phase where we have this sense of, the follow-on from Christianity, but it's about how do I get knowledge about myself? How do I draw on and get the best of myself? How do I get fulfillment in myself? And we hear this all the time. You watch, we've been watching I'm a Celebrity. It's all that I've achieved something for me. I've gone out and found myself, sort of stuff. And so that's actually the world that we're interacting into. So we need to move our mindset from, hey, I'm trying to teach you about this thing you know nothing about, to, okay, how do I help you to understand that maybe there's something more than you? Maybe there's something, which then ties in with the Andy Root type stuff that, we're stuck in this immanent frame where everything around us, we have a sense of, well, we can explain this through science and things like that, and we can understand it all, and then we've actually lost transcendence. And so how do we allow people to experience a God who is God, sort of stuff? So again, similar stuff coming out of Andy Root and Mark Sayers. They're saying it in different ways, but as I read it, I go, yeah, I can see you guys could have a nice conversation between each other. So yeah, that was something that I read and went, oh, that's fascinating. I had not thought of that, and that's completely true. And we need to think about how that impacts our conversations and what we do as a church, because we're very good at answering questions that the rest of society aren't asking, and then wondering why they're not interested in us. Any more comments or thoughts on that, Kylie?
Yeah, it is just, we've got to sell it to them for what it means for them.
Yep. Yeah.
It sounds like saying, like, don't just do it like a textbook. Hey, this is what the Bible is. But it's, if they can't experience it, they're not going to click onto it. So we've got to find ways they can experience it, but jump out of their knowledge or
Yep.
jump out of their
Yep.
situation
Yeah.
and basically pander to them.
Yes, meet them where they're at. And it's that finding that balance of, yes, we meet you where we're at and talk your own language, but not. So, yeah, I guess it's that sense of the church, and some elements of the church are good at going down that self-type rabbit hole. And it's like, well, it's not actually all about yourself. It's about something bigger. But yes, how do we draw you from that to somewhere different? Knowing that we have to go from there, not going, well, that's bad, we'll just start over here because we'll never connect with you at all, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Cool.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Food for
Excellent.
thought.
Food for thought. Good stuff. Hopefully people will watch this and go, well, that's food for thought. We'll finish early. We'll go and annoy Ollie. See you around.
Awesome.
Rod, if
See
you
you
ever
soon.
see this, hope you're having a good holiday and we'll catch you around.